I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm taking the taboos of menopause and perimenopause and bringing light to the dark. No bullshit, no shame. It's time for us to gain a new paradigm in female health, out with the old and in with the new, and I'm bringing fresh perspectives from someone in the arena. I've been practicing women's health for nearly 20 years, and I'm spilling the tea on what it means to live at midlife, knowing that the best is yet to come. I'm sharing my Gen X approach to living through this transition. Sassy, a bit sweary, and always honest. Tactical tips and instantly usable information is my aim. I hope to make you laugh and that you learn something new that helps you embrace the change. Together, we bring power to the peri. Onward to the podcast. You're tuned in to the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and today I have an old friend coming back on the show to talk to us more about this whole protein optimization situation. Have you noticed how many influencers and doctors and people that we interact with are actually talking about this? Anyways, bringing back Angelo Keely to the show to talk to us about protein. Angelo is the co-founder and CEO of Keon, a supplement company focused on helping people look good, feel young, and be strong. And we had the conversation about, what do you take when? Do you supplement the essential amino acids? Do you supplement the protein powder? What about creatine? Where does that fit in? I sort of feel like creatine is for the young skinny kids that are trying to bulk up, but apparently not. There's all kinds of interesting research that's coming out about the importance of creatine for women's health, women's mental health, women's physical health. So if you're like me and you struggle to get the protein in, so recently I did a little experiment with myself on this protein optimization business. Here's what I found. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get to 150 grams. And that's based on ideal body weight. And that would be the equivalent of about 5 chicken breasts in a day. And as I just said to Angelo, I don't have that kind of appetite. I just don't have anywhere to put that much food. And so we talked about how it is you can get sort of protein dense foods in first, and that helps you get to that optimization. And if you can't stomach another meal, how you supplement to make sure that the body's getting what it needs. And that's really where our conversation about, is it whey protein powder? Is it beef protein powder? Is it pea protein powder? Is it maybe not having those at all? Is it having essential amino acids as a supplement? Is that a more effective thing? And one of the things that Angelo has taught me, now both times he's been on the show, is about how our protein absorption goes down. The sensitivity, he called it, to the protein in our diet goes down over time. So it's important to make sure we're not only getting the protein, but that we're getting the kinds of protein and amino acids that we can actually use. Huge, because I don't know about you guys, but I love efficiency. And so when something can be more efficient, I'm all over it. And of course, none of this replaces a whole food diet. Proteins, vegetables, and fruit. I mean, that's what we need to think of first. But I think you'll be interested to hear what Angelo had for breakfast today. It's a little bit unconventional, and yet it makes, from a biochemical point of view and a brain needs and satiation point of view, it actually makes total sense. So I have to tell you this, I did bring up the GLP-1. So if you're one of the women that's taking one of the GLP agonists, so that is Mounjaro, Ozempic, etc., a new one about to come on the market probably in the next year called retatrutide. Don't know what its actual branded name is going to be yet. So these things aren't going away. And there's many people that are having a very different life experience with them. And so what we want to do is be informed when we're taking them, because unfortunately, practitioners who are prescribing them, generally speaking, do not know how to give you nutritional advice to do well with protein optimization on a GLP-1 when you potentially have much less appetite than you normally do. So we still have to get in, even if our appetite's lessened, we still have to get in that optimal amount of protein, and that number of 150 gets thrown around a lot. So that's a part of the conversation that we had, but I think it was beautiful the way Angelo packaged that and said, you have to remember that any kind of caloric restriction, whether it's on GLP-1 agonist or it's because you've chosen to reduce your caloric intake by 30%, or you're on an exercise regime, etc., you're going to lose muscle mass as well as fat. And so here's how you make it. He shares the tips on how we make it more fat loss and less muscle loss. And it's the kind of efficiency that I absolutely adore. Anyways, please tune in to the conversation that I just had with Angelo Keely of Keon, who is here to school us once again. I'm totally here for it. Please excuse me. I'm going to cancel my afternoon plans, go do resistance training after I've had my Keon aminos. I hope this conversation is as useful for you as it has been for me. Thanks for listening. The AG1 you've all heard me talking about for so long just went through a major upgrade. AG1's next gen is here. It's the same single scoop once a day, but now it's clinically backed and formulated with more upgraded vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. The new next gen formula offers a more advanced, clinically backed formula that fills common nutrient gaps and supports gut health, all in the same easy once a day ritual. AG1 has been a game changer for my mornings. It sets the tone for my day, helps me feel my best, and like I'm taking care of my nutrient needs in one step. AG1's next gen includes 5 clinically studied probiotics and additional vitamins and minerals to support whole body health. Now clinically backed with an advanced formula, this is the perfect time to try AG1 if you haven't yet. I've been drinking AG1 daily for 6 years now, and I'm so happy to be partnering with them. Subscribe today and try the next gen of AG1. If you use my link, you'll also get a free bottle of AG D3K2, that's vitamin D3K2, an AG1 welcome kit, and 5 of the upgraded AG1 travel packs with your first order. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com. That's drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely to get started with AG1's next gen and notice the benefits for yourself. That's drinkag1.com/Fiona Lovely. Okay, this is the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and I'm welcoming back an old friend, Angelo Keely of Keon, to the show. Angelo is our resident protein expert here to deliver the goods. Angelo, thanks for coming back to the show.
Thanks for having me back on, Dr. Lovely. I love being on the show.
It's so great to have you, because here's the thing. When you and I first had a conversation, we talked, it was early 2024, if I remember correctly. And we talked about the fact that women were it was starting to be recommended that we do a lot more lifting and consuming protein. And it was really very new when we started to talk about it, you and I. And here we are, like 18 months later, and this conversation has gotten even more important, even louder, and more elements of it coming in. So please clarify some things for us. That's what I hope this conversation will be clarity about how we can do that and do it well.
Sounds great. Let's go.
Okay. So I have a list here that I've compiled, and it goes like this. We need protein for muscles, resilience, bone health, stability, longevity, stress management, and mood. But frankly, 150 grams of protein a day is a lot to eat. How in the heck are we supposed to consume that much? That's like 5 chicken breasts.
That's a good question. I think, probably the most direct way I can say it is I think there is an opportunity to like change our beliefs. And it's not like the easiest, most most agreeable answer I would offer you, but I think there's ways in which like I grew up in a family that was pretty into natural food and natural health, et cetera. And so, I got an opportunity to learn, I think, about eating whole foods from an early age. But then I became a teenager and I got into habits with my friends and just wanting to be like a normal person in society, right? And to have regular relationships and not be this kind of like weirdo food obsessed person that can only eat, certain things like really, rigorously. And so I want to be able to like, as an adult now, I want to be able to have pizza with my kids. I want to be able to, just enjoy life. And that said, I think when you really boil down what's probably the best things for us to eat, it really is whole foods. And when you get down to like the whole foods, it's basically vegetables, fruits, and whole food protein sources. And if you're open to it being animal based, whether that's dairy and eggs or ultimately meat, that's like that's most of the stuff we should eat. That's what's going to be packed full of micronutrients. That's what's going to be packed full of protein, et cetera. And what I would say is if that is mostly what we eat, it doesn't seem quite as hard, right? But if I really want to have, toast with my eggs, if I really want to have, I'm trying to go for like a sandwich instead of maybe just having a salad and meat or, those kinds of decisions, it does become kind of hard. And so I think the first thing I'd say is there is a little bit of a reorienting around like probably most of this is what I've come to for myself around it. So I'm not trying to, be this absolutist, but it comes down to like pretty much it's fruits and vegetables and protein. So like, for example, this morning, so that I could eat enough eggs, and this is actually like right before we're recording this, like what did I eat? I had a big bowl of steamed vegetables, which in the past, that's not necessarily like what I would think would be a breakfast food, right? But if it's like broccoli and cauliflower and carrots, it's more, it's like cruciferous, it's kind of crunchy, it's not super boring. And you put, some olive oil, a little bit of cheese on that with some salt, and then I eat 4 eggs with that. I'm getting a bigger serving of protein, and I can eat that much. At the same time, if I tried to eat, like bread with it, I'd get pretty full too quickly. So it's like it's really making that choice of like instead of eating bread, I'm eating these vegetables. And so I think that's the first thing I'd offer, which I think is not, yeah, again, maybe like the most agreeable, but I think it's really my most direct answer. And then I think maybe more practical and like easier to think about is that there are much more protein dense foods than others. And if you focus on those more protein dense foods that have more protein per calories than other foods and less like total mass than other foods, then it's easier to get in the protein because you're not having to eat so much. And so, yeah, chicken breast is an example of one that's actually pretty dense, but like a Greek yogurt, if you get a non-fat Greek yogurt, it's got like 20 grams of protein for, only like 100 calories. I'm not saying that the calories is the most important thing, but it's not that much food. It's actually pretty like dense. Whereas if you want to eat, a fatty steak, well, all that other fat that's involved in it, or if you're trying to eat, get your protein, say from like, honestly, from vegans, from plant-based sources, it's going to be a lot harder. There's a lot more total rice and beans and lentils and quinoa you have to eat. Like, I mean, you're just looking at like my hands, like a big, gigantic salad bowl, like full of them to get what you could get just from like a little small serving of yogurt. So really focusing on those foods that are more dense in the protein is, a more efficient way of getting there.
Okay, really so interesting. So I'm listening to you talk about your veg and your eggs. And I'm excited for you that you have that kind of an appetite. I think a lot of women in particular, again, this is a show by a woman for women at midlife and menopause. Most of us, like I struggle to get 2 eggs in. So, this is the conversation that I think is really important. And recently I just had decided myself at the beginning of the year, I was like, okay, this is it. I've been doing great with protein, but I'm really going to push to that 150. And for whoever's listening, that's your ideal body weight in it's grams, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
grams of protein. Yeah.
Let's get the grams and the ounces mixed up. So let's make sure if I got the protein expert, let's make sure I'm doing it
That would be
right.
a lot. The ounces
It
you'd
would
be
be
eating.
so much.
You'd be like
So
made of protein. I mean, we are made of
yes.
we are made of protein actually, but yeah.
Which is actually a really good point, right? This is what we're doing. We're feeding that. We're
Hmm.
fueling the system, which is a very different way to think about food than to think about, calories in, etc. Okay, so I had decided I was going to really protein optimize, give it a good push to see how I could do it. And I couldn't get there. I could not get
Hmm.
there. I don't have that kind of appetite in a daily. And I was eating all the right things at all the right time, but I just couldn't even finish half of what was on my plate. And so I'm sure, in fact, I know this to be true. Many women struggle with this. And as we get older, we lose the appetite for meat in particular, protein in particular, which is very much the thing that we need. So can we talk about that a little bit? Where does age fit in here? What do we do if we just don't have that much appetite? Do we keep eating? The last thing I want to say is I found myself feeling like I had disordered eating going on, which is a very easy thing for women in my age group to do because that's how we were raised. That's what we were taught in the diet industry of the 70s and 80s and even the early 90s. And so, with all of that information I just threw at you, Angelo, please comment. I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, I'm so grateful that you came right back to it and said, like, you know what, that actually doesn't really work for me. Because I think that's more of the kind of conversations we need to have when we talk about nutrition rather than you have some guest on the show and he's like, this is exactly the truth of what it is. It's kind of like, well, I hear that maybe works for you, Angela, but that doesn't work for me and other people in my audience. So just to, I think respond right to that, I'll offer you a couple quick solutions.
Please.
One is, it may seem kind of gym bro-y, but egg whites. Like egg whites, like, but for real, here's what I'd say is
Serious?
if it's hard to eat two eggs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Basically half of the egg, about like half of the egg calories is like protein and the other half is fat.
Okay.
And so it is quite filling. Like the egg yolks are quite filling. And if you only ate egg whites, if you got, you could make the egg whites yourself by just separating out the yolks. You could buy little containers of egg whites and you cook that. You could get in like twice the amount of protein for the same amount of total egg that you're eating if you only ate the egg whites.
Okay, interesting. It makes me I'm gonna age myself, but
Yeah.
I'm thinking Rocky Balboa is
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but for real, it's like, man, I don't have the hunger there. And but it'll work. It's like you don't have to eat more. You're just kind of only eating the part of it that is the protein. And another, solution, which obviously we've talked about before, and I'm sure will come up again and again here, this is where supplementation can help. And particularly as we age and our appetite potentially goes down and our sensitivity to the protein, which we can get into more, but like honestly, the protein doesn't even work as well as we get older. And the
okay.
amino acids in the protein don't work as well for our body. And so when you take something like an essential amino acid supplement,
Yep.
that is only the active components of the protein, even a really high quality protein like Greek yogurt or chicken breast, only about 45% or less is the essential amino acids. So less than half is the active component that you're actually trying to get from that protein. Whereas when you take a supplement like Keon aminos or another, free form essential amino acid supplement, it is only the essential amino acids and it's many, many, many times more effective than the whole food protein. So you get a way bigger bang for your buck by consuming this, the supplement instead of just trying to eat more of the proteins. And so you would never want to like replace real food with it. But, if it's like, hey, I can get to 100 grams of protein per day, but that last 50, like that is hard. Well, what's interesting is you could take essential amino acids and you could take, if you're 40 to 50 years old, you could actually just take, 10 to 15 grams of essential amino acids and it's equal to about
Interesting.
50 grams of protein.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, what are amino acids to protein? I know we talked about this on the first episode, but for people that are new to our conversation, please share where they're related, please.
Yeah, so the simple answer is that amino acids are the building blocks that make up proteins. That's the simple answer. And I think the slightly longer, maybe more helpful answer is to actually explain a little bit more what protein is again, so people can grasp that and understand how protein in our diet becomes proteins in our bodies and what its role is. And so the first place to start is just by describing that carbohydrates and fat are very different from protein. So they're all three of these macronutrients we talk about. Carbohydrates and fat, their primary role is to be used as energy. There's like two different fuel sources. It's like electric from the power grid or like natural gas that you buy to run your house, like two different ways to get energy into your house. And you basically burn them. You convert them into this thing called ATP in the body, and you use it to beat your heart and move around, and it's energy. Protein, on the other hand, is less like those energy sources, and it's actually more like the building materials and the construction workers that actually build your house or work on your house, or the handyman that works on your house. And the way that it works is that actually our whole body is made up of protein. Over 50% of our solid mass. So half of you raise like protein's important for bones. It's because half of your bone mass is made up of protein. But also all of your organs, so your heart, your kidney, your liver, your muscle tissue, your skin, your hair, your nails, your hormones, your enzymes, these are all made up of proteins. And the way that proteins function in nature, and that's also in our body, is that they don't last forever. It's not like you build one protein and it's with you for your whole life. Proteins basically have to be recycled because they stop working as well. So when a protein, for example, in my skin, I have millions of proteins that make up my skin. One of them gets old. Right now it's happening, I promise you. And it's actually breaking apart. And as it breaks apart, it breaks out into its individual amino acids, these individual building blocks that make up the protein. And some of them I can't use anymore. Like those little amino acids are no longer good anymore. It'd be like if you remodeled your house and you were doing your bathroom and you're like, actually, the ceramic floor is fine. I'll keep that. But it's like this toilet is like totally broken. It's got to go. I got to throw it away. Similarly, some of the amino acids can be used and some of them have to just be thrown away. And so you pee them out. And so what happens is right now in my body, some of the amino acids are going to be discarded. They're going to get converted into urea and I'm going to pee them out. And so I need more amino acids. If I don't eat more amino acids in my diet somehow, I will not be able to rebuild that skin protein. I won't be able to rebuild heart tissue, et cetera. So what happens is when we eat protein from other living creatures, whether that's a plant or that's an animal or that's the milk of an animal, we digest those proteins. The amino acids that make up those proteins get broken apart in our digestive system. They go into our blood and they go throughout our whole body to help us build new hormones, build new enzymes, build new muscle, et cetera. So amino acids are this key thing that actually is what makes the proteins outside of our body and then makes the proteins inside of our body. So that's what amino acids are.
Okay, that's so helpful. It's reminding me of biochemistry class when I was in professional school, but you teach us this so much more nicely than I learned it. That's so much easier to understand. I love it. So we're literally built of protein. Fascinating. Now, you mentioned supplementation, and I would like to come back to that because I know I hear a lot of my patients and listeners and myself, I get confused about are we taking a protein powder, like a whey powder, or there's pea protein or actual beef protein, whatever. Are we taking, I know we haven't talked about creatine yet, but I'm gonna say creatine versus aminos. And like, what's the role of creatine? And is it just that, I mean, here's what I know about creatine. It's the big tub of stuff that somebody in the teenager in the household bought at GNC.
Yeah.
Right? Please tell us, like, what are the three things? When do we use them? Why would we use them? Please masterclass it. Go for it.
So I'm going to start by just putting a pin in creatine and setting it to the side. I will say creatine is a very legitimate supplement to consider using. It has hundreds of human studies. It is extremely safe and it's very effective for specific use cases. So it's absolutely worth considering. It is very different though from protein and amino acids. So it's kind of its own, it's like its own thing to talk about in a second. Perfect. So what about protein powder, like a whey protein powder, and what about essential amino acids? In short, there are two tools to accomplish the same goal, but one of them is much more effective than the other for specific reasons. Okay. And I'll give the background about why that is. So the way that, and this goes back to my earlier point too about like, how can I get enough protein, you know, and me saying, well, there's some protein sources that are much more concentrated, right? So when you think about trying to get a quality protein source, and it's typically why animal proteins from a biochemical level, this is not from any other level, from a biochemical level, they are much more digestible and effective than plant proteins in a human consuming them. It's because they're more digestible and they're more concentrated and they have a higher proportion of the essential amino acids. You ultimately want a protein source that's like really high in the essential. And even in a really high quality protein like dairy or chicken, it's like 45%. It's still not even over half. Whereas in a plant protein, it could be like 20%, 18, like much lower. And they're harder to digest. So the reason why then that has even greater impact in terms of like how it actually plays out in our body is because the amount of essential amino acids that we get into our blood, and it has a peak concentration, meaning it gets really high, right? It's like there's a lot of essential amino acids in our blood all at the same time. That is what communicates to our body to stimulate protein synthesis, the creation of new proteins. It's what communicates to our body to do protein turnover, to break down older, less effective proteins and to rebuild new ones. So what you want to do is you want to try to get as much essential amino acids in your blood at once. So very interestingly, and this is, I'm not advising that you should try to eat this way. I'm only using it as like as a stepping stone to help explain other stuff. If you eat 30 grams of beef protein, which, and this is in young adults, it's going to become even more persuasive when I start talking about people over 30, over 40, over 50. But in young adults, if you eat 30 grams of beef protein, you will actually stimulate more new protein synthesis. You'll be communicating to the body to rebuild the skin, rebuild liver proteins, rebuild muscle, etc., more than if you ate over twice that amount, 70 grams of beef protein, but you ate that beef protein as part of a mixed meal. With
What's
like
a mixed meal?
Broccoli, potatoes, like a normal meal.
Okay.
So it's weird. It's like, well, why is that? Why you would think if I eat more beef, I'd get like more stimulation. Well, that's the interesting thing. It's that the beef, the proteins in the beef being digested on their own more quickly, and they get into the blood more quickly is what communicates to the body to stimulate protein synthesis. So I'm not saying never eat, always eat your protein separate. Don't eat like whole food meals. Like, because I mean, again, as I started, obviously I'm not trying to endorse people to be like orthorexic or like super bizarre, have disordered eating around trying to, make it the super complicated thing. But it just breaks down like, it's interesting. So like protein on its own is actually more powerful than protein as part of this mixed meal, right? So now when you extend that into the idea of supplementation, a whey protein powder, not even an isolate, just a whey protein powder, which is not quite as refined of a product as like a whey protein isolate, where they remove even more of the fat and the carbs. Whey protein powder has about 3 times the increase in those EAA levels in the blood, and thus is about 3 times the impact as beef, like real beef meat, gram for gram. So 20 grams of this whey protein powder is going to have 3 times the impact as 20 grams of beef protein. So they're not even equal. The whey protein powder is going to have a way more significant impact on actually like doing what you want it to do in your body. Okay. Yeah. And the reason for that is because, again, it's a much simpler protein. It's kind of like, it's been more filtered. It's not processed in any kind of chemical way, but they basically filter out through cold filtration everything else but the isolated protein source. And that's why it's a supplement. A whey protein powder protein powder is not really true whole foods. They are filtered down protein sources. And then if you compare that to essential amino acids, which are 100% only the essential amino acids. And if you take a formula where it's enhanced with more leucine, more isoleucine, more valine, more lysine, it stimulates 3 times the protein synthesis as that whey. So you start to have this spectrum of eating a lot of beef as part of a mixed meal versus just eating beef on its own versus instead taking a whey protein powder versus if I just took this essential amino acid supplement. So in short, protein powders, particularly whey, and essential amino acids are more effective than just trying to eat more meat. Like if you could just get yourself to eat 3 good meals a day with like vegetables and fruits and meats and things like that, awesome. And then if you're going to supplement, it makes more sense rather than trying to eat a whole nother bag of beef jerky or trying to like down a bunch of, a chicken breast or something. It makes more sense to take some whey protein powder, or even 3 times as much sense. It's 3 times as effective to just take essential amino acids. So you start to see like it's really a tool to achieve way greater efficiency than just trying to eat more protein. And what's very provocative and persuasive, I just make this like the big highlight, is that it becomes at least 2 times as important as you get older. So
Say more.
so that example I gave where like the essential amino acids are 3 times as effective, like a Keon aminos. So like, for example, Keon has both these products. We have essential amino acids, Keon aminos, and we have Keon clean protein. The Keon aminos is about 3 times as effective as the Keon clean protein for a young adult. For a woman in her 60s, it's over 6 times the impact.
Okay, break that down.
Yeah, and so the reason why it happens is that as we age, our ability to digest protein diminishes. We simply don't have as much good enzymatic function, and the sensitivity, like these kind of reading mechanisms in our body to be like, oh, these essential amino acids in the blood. I should now I should rebuild my skin. I should rebuild my muscle. They're not as responsive. They become much slower and much less responsive. But if you take a free form essential amino acid supplement, it overcomes that resistance. That's called anabolic resistance. It overcomes it in a way that like a protein powder just doesn't, and whole food definitely does not. So that's why something like a free-form essential amino acid supplement is so much more effective as we get older. It's not like it's literally the same product. It's like if you give the same Keon aminos to a 20-year-old versus that same person when they're 60, right? It's going to be 2 times as effective when they're 60, not because the product changed, but because your body's ability to use it, it's more distinct relative to like, it kind of like for a younger person, the amino acids and the protein are closer in how much your body responds to it. And as you get older, your body simply does not respond to the whole food protein as well as it used to, but it still will respond to these free form essential amino acids. And this is not the kind of thing where it's just like one study. This is like tens of studies. The International Society of Sports Nutrition came out with a position paper, I think about a year and a half ago, and there's like 130 there are 137 studies referenced explaining how all of this works relative to like protein synthesis from whole food protein versus amino acids, et cetera. So short answer, essential amino acids, and actually I'll frame it this way, about whatever decade you are. So like if you're 30, it's about 3 times as effective as a protein powder, 40, 4 times as effective, 50, 5 times as effective, 60, 6 times as effective. That's what aminos are relative to protein powder. And that doesn't mean that protein powder isn't good or can't be used. It's like you could use it to amplify, if you want to make pancakes and make the pancakes a little healthier. If you want to mix it into other baked goods, if you want to have like a really rich smoothie. But if you're having a hard time eating enough and your appetite's not that, great, whey protein powder fills you up. Like it really fills you up. It delays gastric emptying. It makes you feel pretty full. Whereas aminos, you can take them and, you will feel satiated, but you won't feel full. You'll feel very light. So that's how I would consider those two without getting into creatine yet.
So interesting. Okay, I have questions. So here we are, as we get older, we've just learned that we're not absorbing the protein the same way. So we need to really look at how we're doing our supplementation. I know a lot of women, myself included, who are out there buying protein powders to try to get this higher level of protein. And this is what you've just said. You're better off supplementing for a few different reasons with essential amino acids rather than the protein powder, because you're going to get so much more out of that, what your body needs.
Yes, that's the simple answer, especially if you're a woman over 30.
60s.
And a woman in her 60s for sure. Any woman over 30 though. And each decade it's going to become more and more significant. What I want to say though is like I'm not trying to put down protein powder. Like I don't want people to be like, "Oh, this protein powder doesn't even work. It works. It's still a good thing. It's not that it just because aminos are 4, 5, 6 times better doesn't mean the protein is not a good thing.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
just if you are trying to choose the more effective thing, it's much more effective.
Well, and I think when you have a limited appetite, you have to go for efficiency.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned recently, with trying to get the protein optimization. All right, I know we've pinned creatine off to the
Yeah.
side, but I
Oh,
want
we
to
can
bring.
come to it whenever you want to.
Okay,
Yeah.
I do want to talk about it because there is lots of buzz around that. But between the two of us, dropped enough nuggets about appetite, and I want to bring up the GLP-1s because
Hmm.
I think there are so many people that are taking the peptides that I want to make sure we're making space for the fact that a huge portion of the population are taking appetite suppressors, more likely at a time where we're already not feeling like we want to eat the things that we do. I mean, how many times do we see, I've seen this certainly in seniors, is that they're just eating these very carby diets, right? They're definitely not getting the protein. And then we throw appetite suppression on top of that to help with the metabolism. Now, this is not an anti-GLP-1 conversation. I actually think they are very, very effective and helpful for a lot of people. I heard the statistic recently, Angelo, that 98 million Americans are metabolically unhealthy. That was the number I heard, and it just pushed me over with a feather. That's shocking. So, of course, there's a space for it, but I want to share a story of a patient I met with recently. She was a woman over 65 who was dating and not very happy with her body. And she went to see her doctor. Her doctor put her on the GLP-1. She lost a whole pile of weight. And then she plateaued. And she went back to her doctor, and her doctor doubled her dose. So here's the problem I see often is that very thing. But then the woman says to me, now keep in mind, she's here in my office to talk to me about brain health. She wants me to work on brain health for her. She says, oh, by the way, I'm a vegetarian. And I just go, oh my God, that is a recipe for disaster. Not the vegetarian part, the whole thing is a recipe for disaster in a woman over the age of 60, not consuming enough of the macros to drive the biochemistry, not likely even close to consuming the amount of protein she needs. And these things all drive that frailty cascade that we talk about in menopause. The osteoporosis, the sarcopenia, the et cetera, right? Now we're talking neurodegenerative diseases, et cetera. And I go, the answer is not to suppress the appetite more. The answer is to get the macros straightened out. Then we're going to have a much healthier situation. Anyways, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Please.
Yeah, I think there's nothing really you said that I disagree with. I mean, I think it all makes a lot of sense. And maybe some of the underlying science or just the nature of the way that weight loss works and aging works that might be helpful for your
Please.
audience to understand is that there is like a key truth to just the thermodynamics of calories in, calories out. That is part of the story. And it is such the case that when we eat more calories, and there's other more complex things involved with hormones and sleep and ways that our metabolism changes. But fundamentally, when we eat more calories than we need in a day, we store the extra calories as body fat.
Mm-hmm.
And then that body fat remains available to us for a time when we don't have enough food, which is cool. It's a cool mechanism to where it's like, there's kind of a feast and famine nature to our bodies that enables us to survive periods where maybe we don't have enough. That said, right, in a more contemporary world where many of us do have enough, at least in, if you're in North America, then that's not what happens, right? You end up over consuming and not moving enough, and suddenly you end up building these excess stores of fat, and then we get in a situation where it's like, oh, I don't want this, I want to get rid of this, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thought is, well, I'm going to do a diet, or I'm going to do some kind of thing to cut calories to where I consume less than I need in a given day, so that I start to eat away at this fat. Mm-hmm. And that is true whether you're doing it through Weight Watchers point system, counting calories and macros, using a drug intervention like a GLP-1 agonist, all of them, like that's fundamentally what's happening. Maybe it's slightly more complex with a GLP-1 agonist, that like there's other metabolic processes being impacted, but you're right, it's appetite suppression. And suddenly people are only consuming like 1,000 calories a day. So here's the other really big thing though, that I didn't mention in any of that, but that's really key to understand. And that is, in a way similar to like fat is this energy storage for our body, our muscles are the amino acid storage for our body. So if today I restrict my calories and I go down to, let's just say 0 calories, right? Then what's going to happen is I'm going to start, my fat in my body is going to start getting converted immediately, right? To just run my body, to be able to run my brain, to run my muscles, all those things. That said, that skin that we talked about earlier, those proteins in my skin that are breaking apart, or my heart tissue, like my heart is made up of proteins, and those proteins are turning over right now. Some of them are breaking down. And now I suddenly have a deficiency of amino acids in my diet because I'm not eating anything. Where do I get the amino acids to help rebuild that heart tissue?
From the muscle.
From the muscle. I break down my lean muscle to support all these other protein needs throughout my body. So when you restrict calories, you restrict food, and you significantly restrict the amino acids you're getting, you start breaking down your muscle to be able to just survive. So your heart keeps beating, you know? And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when you just do an aggressive calorie restriction, like right at the beginning, up to 40% of it could be muscle. So like you're like, I want to lose 10 pounds, and like, you're so happy, and you get on the scale, and then you come back, whatever, hopefully not more than a few weeks, but over a certain amount of time, you've lost 10 pounds, and you're like, oh, I lost 10 pounds. Well, you lost 6 pounds of body fat, most likely, and about 4 pounds of muscle. And I highly doubt that your goal was to lose muscle, because the example of the woman you described, when she's looking in the mirror, she's not thinking like, oh, I wish I didn't have, like toned arms. She's thinking, oh, I wish I didn't have like this saggy arm I don't like. And I'm not judging her. I think she's perfect as she is. We're all beautiful as we are, right?
Absolutely.
But like, she's not judging like the tone in her muscle, right? She's judging the body fat. And so like, if you really want to be losing the body fat, how can you do that? How can you focus on losing the body fat but maintaining the muscle? And there is research specifically on this, on how is it possible to be able to maintain muscle and only lose body fat, and not lose any muscle when you go on any type of calorie restriction. And one of the key things to keep in mind is resistance training. If you do some type of resistance training, lifting weights 3 times a week, it dramatically increases your chances of not losing any muscle. There's also very specific studies that show that when you go into just a 30% caloric deficit, which is, I think, honestly, a lot, to me, that's actually pretty aggressive caloric deficit, but it's actually not that much compared to like GLP-1 agonists. People are like cutting 50%,
Yes.
But that'd be like if you need 2,000 calories a day to live, and you cut 600 a day, which over the course of a week would be a little over a pound of fat loss in a week. But again, you're not going to lose just 1 pound. You're going to lose some fat and some muscle. In that kind of context, they've shown that you need 300%, 3 times the amount of essential amino acids in one serving to maintain a net protein balance.
Let's talk about stress for a minute. Stress isn't just hard on your mental health, it's also expensive for your biology. If you're dealing with chronic stress, you may want to take a good mineral supplement. Because it turns out when you're constantly stressed, your body burns through a lot more minerals than usual. Chronic daily stress depletes magnesium, potassium, selenium, zinc, and more. Even worse, those mineral deficiencies make future stress hit you harder. If you want to break the cycle of chronic stress, you have to replenish your mineral stores. Minerals make you more resilient to the negative effects of stress, helping you get back on your feet. That's why I love Beam Minerals. Beam makes things easy. You just take a capful of concentrated, mineral-rich liquid each morning. It tastes like water, and it gives you every essential mineral your body needs to deal with the stress in the right ratios with high bioavailability. I've been using Beam for a while now. You'll feel it working within days. You'll have way more energy, and you'll be amazed by the difference it makes for your stress levels. Give Beam a try. Head to beamminerals.com. That's BEAMMINERALS.com and use the code LOVELY for 20% off your first order. Thanks, Beam. Wow.
So it's not just that like you need to keep eating as much protein as you were eating before. You need way more. You need a lot more than like 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight, or even 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight in order to maintain it. You need a lot more. And so in that context, it makes so much sense in any kind of caloric restriction to be supplementing with essential amino acids, because you're getting way lower of any kind of caloric impact than you'd be getting from trying to eat more protein, like actual whole foods. And it's just way more effective. And so if you took essential amino acids, you could take up to 3 servings at one time. Let's say you take 2 servings at a time, 2-3 times a day. You could lose no muscle. You could have this very aggressive fat loss and not lose any muscle. And so I spoke to it on like the, kind of like the vanity perspective earlier, like we're not really trying to lose muscle in this context, but like for real, if you were to look in the mirror and you lost 6 pounds of fat and 4 pounds of muscle versus if you only lost 10 pounds of fat and maintained all your muscle, you will look very different to yourself. Yeah. Like it's a very different look.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
But more importantly, if you're 65 years old, and I mean, whatever, 65, if you're 55, if you're 45, if you're 35, it's still important, but it becomes that much more important as we get older because it's harder to get the gains back. Having healthy, lean muscle in your body helps regulate your glucose. Like muscle absorbs 80% of the sugars that we eat in our diet. It's what helps you stay active. It's what helps you stay strong. It's what keeps you from falling and breaking an arm, breaking a hip. It's what is, again, that reservoir of amino acids for, unfortunately, the time when we do get chronically sick, or maybe we do get hurt, or we're getting older. It's like you need that lean muscle to survive. The people who have more muscle have way higher survival rates for cancer.
Wow, that's interesting.
Because you have these stores of amino acids to live off of, right? Yeah. When you have no appetite and you're under, these intense drug interventions, et cetera. And so muscle is not just this thing to help you look better, but really it's this key investment account to help you live better for the rest of your life. It's like a savings account. More than a savings. It's really an investment account. I think it compounds on itself in terms of how much more value it can provide for you as you get older.
And what an interesting concept to think if we looked at our bodies and looked at our muscle mass rather than looking at the things that were wrong. I mean, that would be a huge shift. I think dudes do that better than the ladies do anyways, especially if they're, trying to bulk up, etc. But what an interesting concept, and thanks for sharing all that information, because I think we're at a place where we could handle how we're prescribing these medications a little better in terms of here's the critical information. You need to make sure you're maintaining muscle mass. How do you do that? All of the things that you just talked about, and more important as we get older, but also drinking enough water because the hydration piece. But thank you for sharing that about we're going to lose muscle if we're on caloric restriction. It's just going to happen. It's not that we're just exclusively losing all fat. It'd be nice if that was true, but it's not that way.
What I just say is it can just be fat.
Say again
if you use essential amino acids.
Yes. Okay.
You could only lose fat. And if you use essential amino acids and you do resistance training, it can just be fat.
I think I'm canceling all my afternoon plans and going to lift heavy somewhere and try not to injure myself. Hey, having the key on aminos first.
I would just say though too, just another nuanced point. It doesn't have to be lifting heavy. This lifting heavy idea it's not scientifically validated. So lifting heavy is great. If you like to lift heavy, go lift heavy. Lifting light and doing more reps is just as good.
Perfect. I
Yeah,
love that.
it does not have to be lifting heavy. It's like, and there's, I mean, without trying to quote tons of studies, like, if you can really, I mean, Google it, look at the research, you look at the international, I don't think the ISSN has a report on that because they're more nutrition focused, but there's lots of good studies out there that just show like really, it doesn't have to be,
Yep.
you don't have to be using barbells. Like you can do all of this
Resistance
with
training.
dumbbells. You can do,
Yes.
yeah, this can be dumbbells. This
Bands.
can be bands.
I
This can
love
be
bands.
body weight training.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
There's a lot of different options.
It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to go to the gym. You can go to the dollar store to get the bands. It's not a big deal. All this stuff is available on apps, on
Yeah.
YouTube. It doesn't need to be difficult.
You just got to do it.
No,
You just got to
yeah,
do
that's
it.
the tough part, isn't it?
It's actually doing it for 30 minutes to an hour, 3 times a week. But when you think about that, it's like, God, it's actually put on some music you really
Yes.
like. Or, you like listening to an audiobook or the news or something, put that on and just get out the dumbbells and go to work.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. I use the catchphrase for this conversation of lifting heavy, but as a chiropractor, of course, I'm deeply concerned about women who haven't touched a dumbbell forever, maybe going in and hearing that they should be lifting, 30-pound dumbbells. Well, listen, someone's going to get injured. That's going to be a shoulder problem or a low back issue. There's just so many problems with that. So I just love that you just responded that way. It's beautiful to deliver that information. Perfectly timed. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so let's do the creatine conversation. What do we need
so what
to
is
know about
creatine?
that? Yes,
So
please.
creatine is something quite different. So the way that, going back to this carbohydrate fat thing, right? So there are these primary energy sources that we consume in our diet. And then we have a couple different ways that we can convert them into ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is like our native energy source, native energy currency, the way that we actually like run our body. And people probably heard of aerobic exercise, anaerobic exercise. Aerobic uses oxygen, anaerobic doesn't. It's just different ways that our body goes through these biochemical processes to convert these energy sources. Well, there's actually a third energy system called the phosphocreatine energy system. And what this does is this uses phosphocreatine, fundamentally creatine, stores inside of our muscle to create energy very quickly in bursts. So it's the energy system that would get tapped if you need to do bench press and you're pushing out reps, if you're sprinting, if you're doing very intense things that are more typically like basically resistance type exercises and sprinting, things like that, kind of quick power exercises. So what happens is we do get creatine in our diet. And typically, like if you eat, basically it's pretty much in red meat and fish. So actually, if you're vegetarian, you're not getting it. So we didn't go too much into the case study of your 65-year-old patient, but tell her to get on creatine.
Yes. Okay. Will do.
Yeah. And so if you're eating red meat and fish, like you're getting it. But if you supplement with it, in addition to that, you can increase the amount of creatine stores that are in your muscle. And what happens is when you go to do the workouts, you go whatever dumbbells you're using for your bicep curls. You used to be able to do 10, now you can do 12. Because the conversion of these phosphocreatine energy stores into ATP is much quicker and faster, and you're able to basically get out more reps. So what happens is you have to take creatine every day. It's not the kind of thing you can take some days only before you work out. You have to take it every day and saturate basically your muscle with it. And then what happens is you can work out more. It makes the working out, the pushing yourself a little bit easier. And if you do 2 more reps of an exercise 3 times a week, right? For 50 weeks of a year, you're going to get a lot stronger. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get better muscular endurance. You're going to get more power. You're going to potentially increase the size of your muscles. Honestly, though, for women, it doesn't increase muscle size that much. It really just increases muscle performance primarily.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
I think it's largely just because of the way that typically women's bodies are adapt to resistance training. They don't try to get jacked, like, and only some men's bodies like get like really bulky and big and jacked, but women's bodies just don't typically develop that way, which I think some women are afraid if I do lift weights, I'm going to get really big. Like, It's pretty hard to get really big. Like there's a lot of men with testosterone, with way higher levels of testosterone than you that cannot get big. So it's not like resistance training is going to make you big. And then I think some of the, but so that's typically why creatine has been your teenage son, right? Or your high school boyfriend, like with this big thing of creatine, because
Yep.
they were using it to improve, how many reps they could do in the gym. And I think because muscle has gained credibility and interest for more populations, for women, for older populations, that suddenly it's like, hey, what other kind of supplements could help me with this? And so that's how creatine has become so much more popular. It actually grew as a category 40% from 2023 to 2024. That is like gigantic growth.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if it does it again this year, because it's just being exposed to more audiences. It's not just like high school and college gym bros anymore. And it really is relevant for everyone. It also has very significant cognitive benefits.
Okay, before you say this, let me
Yeah.
just wrap that up because I want to hear about these cognitive benefits. So basically, we take the aminos to build the muscle, to maintain the muscle.
Mhm.
We take the creatine to saturate the muscle with the fuel that's needed to do longer performance, whatever we happen to be doing.
Yeah, that's a great summary. One other nuance I just offer is the aminos, you can take them without exercise and they will be beneficial. They literally will stimulate proteins. You do not need exercise. People are like, oh, should I just take aminos on days I exercise? Like, no. Anytime you take the aminos, and the more you take the aminos, like you can take them more than one time a day, they will stimulate this protein turnover and they will replace old proteins with new proteins. For example, when NASA conducted studies in 2005 and a little bit after, trying to figure out how to help astronauts maintain their muscle mass in space, because there's no resistance, right? So it's a big risk, losing muscle, osteoporosis. They sponsored a study where they kept these young adults at bed rest for 28 days, did not get out of bed for 28 days, had 3 meals a day, but then also supplemented with essential amino acids 2 times a day. Over the course of 28 days, they lost no muscle mass.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's
without
amazing.
exercise, they didn't lose muscle because the essential amino acid intervention, by taking the essential amino acids a couple times a day, larger doses, I think it's 10 grams twice a day, they were able to literally lose no muscle. So just having that in your mind, that it's like the essential amino acids are doing what the resistance training does and doing what protein does, but to a way, greater impact than the protein, not necessarily way greater than the resistance training is going to train your muscles in a unique way. But the amino acids are literally like building and maintaining your muscles, just taking it. The creatine, like you're saying, is this tool to help your muscles work harder.
So interesting. Okay, so take your aminos, even if you're planning couch surfing, but maybe hold off on the creatine. Take that on the days that you're planning to go to the gym. Is that the right way to do it?
Sorry, I didn't mean this. Like, no, creatine also you have to take every day for it to work. Like, because you have to saturate your muscles. What I'm just saying is, like, if you start taking, here's a simple way of saying it. Both of them take every day. Take aminos and creatine every day. You take aminos and creatine every single day for a couple months.
Yep.
The aminos are going to work regardless of whether or not you exercise over those 2 months. The creatine is only really going to work and make its bigger impact if you exercise while on it.
Okay.
But both are to be taken every day.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I love the aminos product, by the way. I take it every day. It's really, you talked about satiety earlier, and I find it makes a huge difference in terms of whether I have hunger. And I know I asked you about this when we did this conversation last time, but I actually feel hydrated when I have my aminos in the morning.
They are hydrating.
That's great, because this is not
yeah.
something we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's interesting. So the way that, without trying to bore everyone and go into one more nerd session, the way that hydration works is basically the tonicity of the water relative to your blood or the liquid that you're drinking and how much can get into the small intestine. So the reason why electrolytes work as a hydrating beverage, there's a different thing from like if you work out really hard for 2 hours in the sun and you lose your sodium and you're trying to replenish it, that's a separate thing. That's not hydration. That's like replenishing lost minerals. But literally the reason why electrolytes can work to help hydrate you is because they improve the tonicity of the water. So can glucose. Like Gatorade isn't just a made up thing. Like Gatorade actually works. especially for athletes, because you find the right amount of sugar and the right amount of electrolytes in the water and actually helps to hydrate. It gets more fluids into the small intestine. Aminos do the same thing to a degree,
Okay.
basically just as well as like glucose and electrolytes do. So it actually is very hydrating. And it's funny. Yeah, I know lots of people like to maybe mix them with electrolytes, and you can, there's no harm in it, but you don't actually need the electrolytes to make the water more hydrating. The aminos are doing it on their own.
Well, until you said it just like you just did, I didn't realize that that's actually it's like the mouthfeel of the aminos is very
Uh-huh.
similar to the electrolyte powders to me. And wow. And
It's kind of softened in a way.
yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
I love it. Anyways, okay, where can people find out more about Keon Aminos? Where can they find out more about you? Please share.
Yeah. I'm not like a huge personal brand person. I love coming on shows and just educating and turning more people on to like
It's
how they can.
clear that you love it. It's clear. And thank you.
Yeah. But you can learn more about Keon at getkeon.com, getkion.com. We're on, social channels. But yeah, I think the website, and honestly, if there's anything in this show where you were really interested in, you wanted to know more about, we have a phone team that's in the office. So you can just call, talk to people, ask any questions you have, or go on the website. Lots of good blog content.
I love it.
But yeah,
I love it. Yeah, your team is so obviously of high integrity. Every interaction I've had with them have been just fantastic, and you too. So you must. What do they say? It's the heart of the leader. It shows up in the team. That's certainly true with Keon. So thank you for that, for being a great leader. And thank you for delivering the goods. Once again, I took a pile of notes and I have learned a ton, and I will once again be doing different things. I mean, it's always about learning, right? It's about saying, okay, how can we do it differently, better than we did yesterday? So you've given us a whole host of points to work on. So thank you, Angelo. I appreciate that.
thanks for having me on. It's always a
Oh,
pleasure.
my pleasure. Now, my final question for you, which I've asked you before, but let's see what comes today. It goes like this.
Hmm.
Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Breathe. Breathe, man. Just be patient and breathe. It's all good.
just, just relax.
Yeah,
I
just
like
relax and
that.
just like breathe. I mean, I feel like that's what I tell like my kids, as like they're going through growing up and experiencing the whole thing. I'm like, it's all good. Just breathe, be patient, trust the process.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's
Yeah.
really good information. Angelo Keely, thank you so much for joining me on the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Lovely.
I love it when an expert like Angelo comes on the show to give us the dirt on everything we need when it comes to this whole protein game. Because as I said in the episode, there's so much of this. We can get so caught up in the messaging around that it can really easily become for us ladies, especially those of us that grew up in the diet industry of the 80s and 90s, 70s too, I suppose. We can just get so caught up in it and it can become really disordered. So I'm so grateful to Angelo for coming on the show and clearing things up. He just has a tendency to do that when he visits us here at the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. So to recap, essential amino acids are practical and most scientifically validated for how you keep your muscles at the same time you're losing fat, which is something we want to do at midlife as we have this shift, this metabolic shift that happens. It helps us maintain muscle and functional fitness as we age. Essential amino acids improve results from exercise, support overall hormone production, help regulate mood and energy levels throughout the day, keep our healthy skin, hair, and nails. And I'm here to say, as someone who's taken the Keon Aminos product for 18 months, 2 years at this point, I absolutely can attest to all of these things. So if you want to try it yourself, visit getkeon.com/lovely. That's getkeon.com/lovely for 20% off. Thank you for listening. Thank you for spending time with me today. I know I'm grateful for it. I know Angelo Keely is as well. And I hope you learned something today. I know I did, and I'm taking away all the lessons that that got shared today. And well, I'm about to go have my dinner, so I'm going to make sure that I've got lots of protein in there. And when I look at my count for the day, if I'm low, I know exactly how to top it up with essential amino acids. Thanks for listening. Take care. Until next time, I'm Dr. Fiona Lovely, and you're tuned in to the Not Your Mother's Menopause podcast. The information and other content provided in this show, or in any linked materials, is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise or treatment. We are doctors, but we aren't your doctor. Seek your doctor's opinion. If you or any other person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical treatment. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have heard in this podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The opinions and views expressed on this page and in this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution. Thank you.